Hello. Looks like we're live. Let me move this. How is everyone? Welcome to the first of hopefully many Muse Reads Tolkien. We'll give it a few minutes and see who pops in. Let's see. Alright, YouTube looks okay. For once. Let's see here. Okay. Oop. Goodness gracious, what was that sound? Okay, weird. Alright, well, while we're waiting for folks to see if people hop in, I guess I'll kind of explain what it is we're going to be reading today. I've wanted to reread Tolkien's works for a long time, and thought it'd be fun to do it as a group, because I know I've heard personally, and I've personally had problems with it. Reading Tolkien's works can be very hard. Is it because I mentioned it the other day? It's something that had always kind of been on my mind, but when you mentioned it, and I was like, you know what? I should get around to doing that, and seeing if folks enjoy that. We're going to start with the Silmarillion. The Silmarillion is an interesting piece of work that can be kind of hard for folks to read. We'll see if anybody can hop in. I'm doing this a little earlier in the day so I don't have to move my other streams, but if it looks like we're not going to be able to get a lot of folks to show up this early in the day, we may have to move it. Because I had a lot of folks saying they wanted to hop in, but most of my audience, you know, is in EST times, so maybe this is a bad time of day. Hey, Candy. Hey, Phil. Ooh, speaking as someone who's interested in lore but couldn't get through reading Tolkien, I'm hyped. Yeah, it's very hard to read. Incredibly hard to read. And I say that as someone who loves these works. Hey, Sarah. I actually, to give a little background, I wrote my thesis in college on Tolkien, so I have read all his works backward and forwards like 12 times. I've read a lot of books about him and his life and his works, so I know a decent amount about him. I was thinking about it the other day, and probably this is the universe I know the most about after Silent Hill. Hello, Billy and Helena. Hello, Elfin. Yeah, Silmarillion's hard to read. The Silmarillion is a collection of kind of short story works that was published after Tolkien died. Tolkien, I'm pretty sure, only actually published The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit while he was alive, but he wrote a lot of stories and was working on this universe for so long, throughout the entirety of his life. And so he had a lot of things that were left untouched when he passed, and his son, Christopher Tolkien, who himself recently passed, unfortunately, spent most of his life going through his father's works, editing them and publishing them. The Silmarillion was probably, I think, the first thing that Tolkien edited, or the younger Tolkien edited and published, but there was also, later on, stories he took from the Silmarillion and other places and filled out into books of their own, like Beren and Luthien, Children of Húrin. There's a lot of books about this universe. Hey, Jeff. You haven't really missed anything. I've just kind of been talking about what the Silmarillion is. I also did want to show these off just because I'm so in love with them. This is The Hobbit, one of the original printings. It was my father's copy. Let's see what year it came out. 1966. I don't remember if that's the year it was published, but it definitely is one of the first printings. He also had one of the first printings of The Lord of the Rings. This is like a 50-year-old box set. But we'll get to reading those eventually. I want to do... Oh, the music box. It's on a shelf back there. But Joe did get me a music box. Which, speaking of, let me know if the music's too loud or too quiet or what have you. Timeline-wise, this is the first work, the Silmarillion. So we will start with that. It is a collection of short stories that he never really... Like, they weren't necessarily intended to be put together this way or read this way. Like, he never really got to finish them. He was working on this his whole life. A lot of these stories were written earlier in his life. During the Great War, he was in World War I. He wrote some in the trenches. He ended up, I don't remember what illness, probably trench foot or something, and ended up hospitalized and removed from the war. He wrote in the hospital. And a lot of his stories are definitely colored by his experience with war. Alright. Yes, it's wild to think Tolkien produced so much lore and work that a person could spend their whole life organizing and publishing his unfinished work. That's really something that stands out with him, is that he did spend so much time creating all this. The Hobbit was written before the war, and Loder was after the war. Both were after. Silmarillion was really what he wrote during the war. Hobbit was written during his college years as a professor, not as a student. I believe while his son was at war, because his son also was in World War II. So he had a lot of experience and feelings about war and how horrible it was. So yeah, we're going to start with the Ainulindale, which I've probably said wrong, but this first story is the story of creation. It's his creation myth for this universe, how the gods created the universe. And what's really interesting is he is a devout Christian, but he was also a scholar of mythology. He loved Norse myths and mythology like that. So his mythology has a one god, and it has many gods. He kind of plays with both having a pantheon of gods and the singular Christian god. It's an interesting thing when you look at his universes, how his love and appreciation for pagan cultures, if that's kind of a, you know what I mean, a broad term, but his love and appreciation for those kind of cultures, but also his own Christian viewpoint merged together in interesting ways. It's cool you had your connection with your father. Yes, that is something that we definitely bonded over. All right, the music of the Ainur. There was Eru, the One, who in Arda is called Ilúvatar. We're gonna already stop, because there's a lot of words right there. It has a Catholic view. Yes, he was Catholic. This man was so Catholic that he said that elves didn't ever fuck until they got married, and then they fucked a little bit to have kids, and that's all they ever did. Elves, you know, the immortals that live forever, don't ever have sex. Anyway, so Arda is kind of the name for the whole globe of Tolkien's world. Like, Middle-earth is what everybody thinks of as the world, but Middle-earth is actually like a continent in Arda. So when he says there was Eru, who in Arda is called Ilúvatar, he's saying in Arda, in this planet, the god was called Eru, the One, Ilúvatar. He made the first Ainur, the Holy Ones, that were the offspring of his thought, and they were with him before aught else was made. And he spoke to them, propounding to them themes of music, and they sang before him, and he was glad. But for a long while they sang only each alone, or but a few together, while the rest hearkened. For each comprehended only the part of the mind of Ilúvatar from which he came, and in the understanding of their brethren they grew but slowly. Yet even as they listened they came to deeper understanding, and increased in unison and harmony. And it came to pass that Ilúvatar called together all the Ainur and declared to them a mighty theme, unfolding to them things greater and more wonderful than he had yet revealed. And the glory of its beginning and the splendor of its end amazed the Ainur, so that they bowed before Ilúvatar and were silent. Then Ilúvatar said to them, Of the theme that I have declared to you, I will now that ye make in harmony together a great music. And since I have kindled you with the flame imperishable, ye shall show forth your powers in adorning this theme, each with his own thoughts and devices if he will. But I will sit and hearken and be glad that through you great beauty has been wakened into song. So, hello, Brian. I don't know if y'all would prefer if I just read it all the way through and then explain, or if I should read a couple audio, if I should read like a few paragraphs and then explain. The Ainur are the minor gods, his pantheon of gods, who are more active characters with more personality. Eru Ilúvatar is more of a personality-less kind of singular god concept. He is more of a abstract god. He doesn't have like a personality and a individualism the way that the other gods do. We'll learn more about the Ainur later, but they are very similar to, like, you think of a Greek pantheon where they have specific powers and histories and personalities. That's what the Ainur will be. So he's created the Ainur, and they all sing together, and the singing is what is creating the world. The singing, each one has kind of a different thing they can sing because they each have their own individual power because of how Ilúvatar created them. And I always thought they were angels. Angels is a way to look at it as well, but I feel like gods is probably better just because of how Tolkien, like, he writes them a little bit like a mythological pantheon, like it was an ancient Norse myth or Greek myth. Alright, let's see here. Then the voices of the Ainur, like unto harps and lutes and pipes and trumpets, and viols and organs, and like unto countless choirs singing with words, began to fashion the theme of Ilúvatar to a great music. And a sound arose of endless interchanging melodies woven in harmony that passed beyond hearing into the depths and into the heights. And the places of the dwelling of Ilúvatar were filled to overflowing, and the music and the echo of the music went out into the void, and it was not void. Never since have the Ainur made any music like to this music, though it has been said that a greater still shall be made before Ilúvatar by the choirs of the Ainur and the children of Ilúvatar after the end of days. Then the themes of Ilúvatar shall be played aright, and take being in the moment of their utterance. For all shall then understand fully his intent in their part, and each shall know the comprehension of each, and Ilúvatar shall give to their thoughts the secret fire, being well pleased. Let's see. There's some Christian theories that say creation was a song and angels sang creation with God. That makes sense given a lot of the Bible, there's power in words, and Hebrew tradition also there's power in words and in names and that kind of thing. And so it's not too far to go to say that song also being words and names would have power. But it's very interesting that Tolkien sees the universe as being created through music because he absolutely loves music and poetry. His books are full of songs that he's written that I'm sure we will get to at some point. And I think it's a really lovely image to imagine that the world was created by all these creatures coming together and singing. Alright. But now Ilúvatar sat and hearkened, and for a great while it seemed good to him, for in the music there were no flaws. But as the theme progressed, it came into the heart of Melkor to interweave matters of his own imagining that were not in accord with the theme of Ilúvatar, for he sought therein to increase the power and glory of the part assigned to himself. To Melkor among the Ainur had been given the greatest gifts of power and knowledge, and he had a share in all the gifts of his brethren. He had gone often alone into the void places, seeking the imperishable flame, for desire grew hot within him to bring into being things of his own, and it seemed to him that Ilúvatar took no thought for the void, and he was impatient of its emptiness. Yet he found not the fire, for it is within Ilúvatar. But being alone, he had begun to conceive thoughts of his own, unlike those of his brethren. Getting some Lucifer vibes there, aren't we, huh? Very, very similar to some figures from Christian stories. Some of these thoughts he now wove into his music, and straightway discord arose about him, and many that sang nigh him grew despondent, and their thought was disturbed, and their music faltered. But some began to attune their music to his rather than to the thought which they had at first. Then the discord of Melkor spread ever wider, and the melodies which had been heard before foundered in a sea of turbulent sound. But Iluvatar sat and hearkened until it seemed that about his throne there was a raging storm, and as of dark waters that made war upon one another, in an endless wrath that would not be assuaged. Then Iluvatar arose, and the Ainur perceived that he smiled, and he lifted up his left hand, and a new theme began amid the storm, like and yet unlike to the former theme, and it gathered power and had new beauty. But the discord of Melkor rose in uproar and contended with it, and again there was a war of sound more violent than before, until many of the Ainur were dismayed and sang no longer, and Melkor had the mastery. Then again Iluvatar arose, and the Ainur perceived his countenance was stern. He lifted up his right hand, and behold, a third theme grew amid the confusion, and it was unlike the others, for it seemed at first soft and sweet, a mere rippling of gentle sounds and delicate melodies, but it could not be quenched, and it took to itself power and profundity. And it seemed at last there were two musics progressing at one time before the seat of Iluvatar, and they were utterly at variance. The one was deep and wide and beautiful, but slow and blended with an immeasurable sorrow, from which its beauty chiefly came. The other had now achieved a unity of its own, but it was loud and vain and endlessly repeated. It had little harmony, but rather a clamorous unison as many trumpets braying upon a few notes, and it essayed to drown out the other music by the violence of its voice, but it seemed that its most triumphant notes were taken by the other and woven into its solemn pattern. In the midst of this strife, whereat the halls of Iluvatar shook, and a tremor ran out into the silences yet unmoved, Iluvatar arose a third time, and his face was terrible to behold. He raised up both his hands, and in one chord deeper than the abyss, higher than the firmament, piercing as the light of the eye of Iluvatar, the music ceased. So what's happening there is they were singing the music of creation, and Melkor said, I got a better idea. My idea is cooler than God's idea, so I'm gonna sing my own shit. And the others are like, wow, this is, what's going on here? And they stop singing, and God stands up and says, nah, I'm gonna kick your ass with my hot beats. And they do a sing-off, and God wins. And God's about to shoot down Melkor. You can see already we have our Satan, our Lucifer figure showing up here, causing trouble in the beginning of time. Before we continue, there's a very sad cat at my door. Gandalf's come to join us! Hi, baby boy. Aw, baby boy. Oh. So at night, my other cats sleep in my room with me, and Gandalf likes to explore the house. I don't know where he sleeps. Because of that, I did not notice until this morning he was locked in a bedroom all night. So he was just at the door crying, and when I went to open the door, he ran into the room to the food bowl and was like, I'm starving! Feed me! Poor baby. Alright. Then Iluvatar spoke, and he said, Mighty are the Ainur, and mightiest among them is Melkor. But that he may know, and all the Ainur, that I am Iluvatar, those things that ye have sung, I will show them forth, that ye may see what ye have done. And thou, Melkor, shalt see that no theme may be played that hath not its uttermost source in me, nor can any alter the music in my despite. For he that attempteth this shall prove but mine instrument, in the devising of things more wonderful which he himself hath not imagined. Then the Ainur were afraid, and they did not yet comprehend the words said to them. And Melkor was filled with shame, of which came secret anger. But Iluvatar arose in splendor, and he went forth from the fair regions he'd made for the Ainur, and the Ainur followed him. But when they were come into the void, Iluvatar said to them, Behold your music. And he showed to them a vision, giving to them sight where before was only hearing. And they saw a new world made visible before them, and it was globed amid the void. And it was sustained therein, but was not of it. And as they looked and wondered, this world began to unfold its history, and it seemed to them that it lived and grew. And when the Ainur had gazed for a while and were silent, Iluvatar said again, Behold your music. This is your minstrelsy, and each of you shall find contained herein, amid the design that I set before you, all these things that which it may seem that he himself devised or added. And thou, Melkor, will discover all the secret thoughts of thy mind, and will perceive they are but a part of the whole, and tributary to its glory. And many other things Iluvatar spoke to the Ainur at that time, and because of their memory of his words, and the knowledge that each has of the music that he himself made, the Ainur know much of what was and is to come, and few things are unseen by them. Yet some things there are they cannot see, neither alone nor taking counsel together. For to none but himself has Iluvatar revealed all that he has in store. And in every age there come forth things that are new and have no foretelling, for they do not proceed from the past. And so it was that as this vision of the world was played before them, the Ainur saw that it contained things which they had not thought. And they saw with amazement the coming of the children of Iluvatar, and the habitation that was prepared for them. And they perceived that they themselves, in the labor of their music, had been busy with the preparation of this dwelling, and yet knew not that it had any purpose beyond its own beauty. For the children of Iluvatar were conceived by him alone. They came with the third theme, and they were not in the theme which Iluvatar propounded at the beginning, and none of the Ainur had part in their making. Therefore, when they beheld them, the more did they love them, being things other than themselves, strange and free, wherein they saw the mind of Iluvatar reflected anew, and learned yet a little more of his wisdom, which otherwise had been hidden even from the Ainur. So what's happening here is they sang that song all together, and Melkor tried to fuck with it, and Iluvatar said no. And then Iluvatar showed them that it was this magical spell, basically, that is going to create the entire world. And the children of Iluvatar are elves and men. So the elves and the men were only created by the one god. The Ainur did not have anything to do with them, but the world the Ainur created was made for them. Now the children of Iluvatar are elves and men, the firstborn and the followers. And amid all the splendors of the world, its vast halls and spaces, and its wheeling fires, Iluvatar chose a place for their habitation in the deeps of time, and in the midst of the innumerable stars. And this habitation might seem a little thing to those who consider only the majesty of the Ainur, and not their terrible sharpness. As who should take the whole field of Arda for the foundation of a pillar, and so raise it until the cone of its summit were more bitter than a needle? Or who consider only the immeasurable vastness of the world which still the Ainur are shaping, and not the minute precision to which they shape all things therein? But when the Ainur had beheld this habitation in a vision, and had seen the children of Iluvatar arise therein, then many of the most mighty among them bent all their thought and their desire towards that place. And of these Melkor was the chief, even as he was in the beginning the greatest of the Ainur who took part in the music, and he feigned, even to himself at first, that he desired to go thither and order all things for the good of the children of Iluvatar, controlling the turmoils of the heat and the cold that had come to pass through him. But he desired rather to subdue to his will both elves and men, envying the gifts which with Iluvatar promised to endow them, and he wished himself to have subjects and servants, and to be called lord, to be a master over other wills. But the other Ainur looked upon this habitation set within the vast space of the world, which the elves call Arda, the earth, and their hearts rejoiced in light, and their eyes, beholding many colors, were filled with gladness. But because of the roaring of the sea they felt a great unquiet, and they observed the winds and the air and the matters of which Arda was made, of iron and stone and silver and gold and many substances. But all of these, water they most greatly praised. And it is said by the Eldar that in the water there lives yet the echo of the music of the Ainur, more than in any substance else that is in this earth. And many of the children of Iluvatar hearken still unsated to the voices of the sea, and yet know not for what they listen. Now to water had that Ainu, whom the elves call Ulmo, turned his thoughts, and of all most deeply was he instructed by Iluvatar in music. So now we're talking about a specific Ainur who is named Ainu. A-I-N-U. A little confusing. And he's also called Ulmo, because Tolkien was very much in love with language, and he loved the fact that, multiple languages and multiple cultures refer to the same things, different words, so he will often say, and so there was this guy who was called this by these people, and these people called him this, and sometimes they knew him as this, and it can get a little hard to follow. But we are basically speaking of the water god, who's the Neptune, that guy. Of the air and wind, Manwe most pondered, who is the noblest of Ainu. Of the fabric of earth had Aiul thought, to whom Ilúvatar had given skill and knowledge scarce less than to Melkor. So right now we're kind of saying, okay, this is the god that's most associated with water. This is the god associated most with wind. We're kind of learning a little bit about all these gods. They become far more indistinguishable and far more interesting later on, but right now they're literally just getting kind of one descriptor. Aiul is the earth god. Yeah. The delight and pride of Aiul is in the deed of making, and in the thing made, and neither in possession nor in his own mastery. Wherefore he gives and hoards not, and is free from care, passing ever on to some new work. And Ilúvatar spoke to Ulmo, and said, Seest thou not how here in this little realm, the deeps of time, Melkor hath made war upon thy province. He hath bethought him of bitter cold immoderate, and yet hath not destroyed the beauty of thy fountains, nor of thy clear pools. Behold the snow and the cunning work of frost. Melkor hath devised heats and fire without restraint, and hath not dried up thy desire, nor utterly quelled the music of the sea. Behold rather the height and glory of the clouds, and the ever-changing mists, and listen to the fall of rain upon the earth. And in these clouds thou art drawn nearer to Manwe thy friend, whom thou lovest. Then Ulmo whispered, Truly water is become now fairer than my heart imagined. Neither had my secret thought conceived the snowflake, nor in all my music was contained the falling of the rain. I will seek Manwe, that he and I may make melodies for ever to thy delight. And Manwe and Ulmo have from the beginning been allied, and in all things have served most faithfully the purpose of Ilúvatar. This seems almost poetic in the style of something from oral tradition, maybe. Definitely. Because he loved those kinds of stories. He translated many of those stories, and I think there's a lot of that in this, as well as kind of, biblical in the beginning, and he said, let there be light. Like I said, there's an interesting mix of, more Christian and Catholic ideas and storytelling, and also pagan and Norse folklore. It's very, very interesting. Are you here to listen with us, buddy? But even as Ulmo spoke, and while the Ainur were yet gazing upon this vision, it was taken away and hidden from their sight, and it seemed to them that in that moment they perceived a new thing, darkness, which they had not known before except in thought. But they had become enamored of the beauty of the vision, and engrossed in the unfolding of the world which came there to being, and their minds were filled with it, for the history was incomplete, and the circle of time not full wrought when the vision was taken away. And some have said that the vision ceased ere the fulfillment of the dominion of men and the fading of the firstborn. Wherefore, though the music is over all, the Valar have not seen as with the light the later ages or the ending of the world. So basically what he's saying there is nobody knows how the world's going to end. Then there was unrest among the Ainur, but Ilúvatar called to them and said, I know the desire of your minds, that what ye have seen should verily be, not only in your thought, but even as ye yourselves are, and yet other. Therefore I say, Ea, let these things be, and I will send forth into the void the flame imperishable, and it shall be at the heart of the world, and the world shall be, and those of you that will may go down into it. And suddenly the Ainur saw afar off a light, as it were a cloud with a living heart of flame, and they knew that this was no vision only, but that Ilúvatar had made a new thing, Ea, the world that is. So like I said, very much a Christian thing. He says, and it is. Ea, so Ea is the whole thing. Arda is the continent in the thing. Kind of like Earth, North America, United States. Ea, Arda, Middle-earth. Thus it came to pass that of the Ainur some abode still with Iluvatar beyond the confines of the world, but others, and many among them, many of the greatest and most fair, took leave of Iluvatar and descended into it. But this condition Iluvatar made, or it is the necessity of their love, that their world should henceforward be contained and bound in the world. Their power should be thenceforth contained and bound in the world, to be within it forever, until it is complete, so that they are its life and it is theirs. Therefore they are named the Valar, the powers of the world. So, the world has been created, and some of the gods and angels have stayed out in the existence, the outer realm, the outer world with the big guy. But there are other ones who really loved the idea of the physical realm so much that they decided to go there. By going there, they have sealed themselves into it. They can't go back. They are part of this world until its end. And those are the gods who are going to be heavily involved in all of the plot of Lord of the Rings, of Hobbit, they are in the background of all these stories because they are part of this world. Okay. But when the Valar entered into Ea, they were at first astounded and at a loss, for it was as if naught was yet made which they had seen in the vision, and all was but on point to begin, and yet unshaped, and it was dark. For the great music had been but the growth and flowering of thought in the timeless halls, and the vision only a foreshowing. But now they had entered in at the beginning of time, and the Valar perceived that the world had been but foreshadowed and foresung, and they must achieve it. So began their great labors in wastes unmeasured and unexplored, and in ages uncounted and forgotten, until in the deeps of time and in the midst of the vast halls of Ea there came to be that hour and that place, where was made the habitation of the children of Iluvatar. And in this work the chief part was taken by Manwe and Eul and Ulmo, the wind and the earth and the water gods. But Melkor too was there from the first. That's Satan, don't forget. And he meddled in all that was done, turning it if he might to his own desires and purposes, and he kindled great fires. When therefore earth was yet young and full of flame, Melkor coveted it, and he said to the other Valar, "This shall be my own kingdom, and I name it unto myself." But Manwe was the brother of Melkor in the mind of Iluvatar, and he was the chief instrument of the second theme that Iluvatar had raised up against the discord of Melkor. So now we're seeing Melkor is our Satan, Manwe is our Michael. He is the chief, awesomest god on the good guy's side. He called unto himself many spirits, both greater and less, and then they came down into the fields of Arda and aided Manwe, lest Melkor should hinder the fulfillment of their labor forever, and earth should wither ere it flowered. And Manwe said unto Melkor, "This kingdom thou shalt not take for thine own wrongfully, for many others have labored here no less than thou." And there was strife between Melkor and the other Valar. And for that time Melkor withdrew and departed to other regions, and did there what he would. But he did not put the desire of the kingdom of Arda from his heart. Now the Valar took to themselves shape and hue, and because they were drawn into the world by love of the children of Iluvatar, for whom they hoped, they took shape after that manner which they had held in the vision of Iluvatar, save only in majesty and splendor. So they look like people now, but really awesome-looking people. Moreover, their shapes come of their knowledge of the visible world rather than the world itself, and they need it not, save only as we use raiment. And yet we may be naked and suffer no loss of our being. Therefore the Valar may walk, if they will, unclad, and then even the Eldar cannot clearly perceive them, though they be present. Eldar is a fancy word for elf. But when they desire to clothe themselves, the Valar take upon them forms, some as of male and some as of female. For that difference of temper, they're dumb. And it is but bodied forth in the choice of each, not made by the choice. Even as with us, male and female may be shown by the raiment, but is not made thereby. But the shapes wherein the great ones array themselves are not at all times like to the shapes of kings and queens of the children of Iluvatar, for at time they may clothe themselves in their own thought, made visible in forms of majesty and dread. And the Valar drew themselves many companions, some less, some well nigh as great as themselves, and they labored together in the ordering of the earth and the curbing of its tumults. Then Melkor saw what was done, and that the Valar walked on earth as powers visible, clad in the raiment of the world, and were lovely and glorious to see, and blissful, and that the earth was becoming a garden for their delight, for its turmoils were subdued. His envy grew then, the greater within him, and he also took visible form. But because of his mood and the malice that burned in him, that form was dark and terrible. And he descended upon Arda in power and majesty greater than any of the Valar, as a mountain that wades in the sea and has its head above the clouds, and is clad in ice and crowned with smoke and fire. And the light of the eyes of Melkor was like a flame that withers with heat and pierces with a deadly cold. Thus began the first battle of the Valar with Melkor for the dominion of Arda, and of those tumults the elves know but little, for what here has been declared is come from the Valar themselves, with whom the Eldalie, fancy word, with whom the Eldalie spoke in the land of Valinor, and by whom they were instructed. But little would the Valar ever tell of the wars before the coming of the elves. Yet it is told among the Eldar that the Valar endeavored ever, in spite of Melkor, to rule the earth and to prepare it for the coming of the firstborn. And they built lands, and Melkor destroyed them. Valleys they delved, and Melkor raised them up. Mountains they carved, and Melkor threw them down. Seas they hollowed, and Melkor spilled them, and naught might have peace or come to lasting growth. For as surely as the Valar began a labor, so would Melkor undo it or corrupt it. And yet their labor was not at all in vain, and though nowhere and in no work was their will and purpose wholly fulfilled, and in all things were in hue and shape other than the Valar had first intended, slowly nonetheless the earth was fashioned and made firm. And thus was the habitation of the children of Ilúvatar established, at the last in the deeps of time, amidst the innumerable stars. That is the first story, the Ainulindale, which is the creation of the world. So long story short, that was 1, 2, 3, 4 pages, and his language makes it feel so much longer, in good ways and bad ways. Some of his language is really lovely. Some of it is so overwrought that it's hard to read. So basically, the one god creates creation. He creates many minor gods who sing with him to help create the world. One of those gods, Melkor, is a douchebag and tries to fuck it up, but he doesn't manage. And they create the world, and they're preparing it for the mortals, the younger folk, the elves and men. And so some of the gods, the Valar, say, we like Earth, we're gonna go down and we're gonna make it. And Melkor goes with them, because he's a jealous jerk. And they're creating the world for the elves and the men, and Melkor keeps fucking it up, but they're still trying to make the world, and there's ages upon ages of them making a world and Melkor fucking it up. And the major gods that have been mentioned so far are Manwe, who, like I said, is going to be a very, very important figure. He's the opposite of Melkor. He's the good guy. Ulmo is the water dude who will feature in some stories. He's also really important because, like, the ocean is a huge thing in these stories. And they mentioned Aiul, who is going to feature very heavily in all the stories of the dwarves because he's, like, the major dwarf god. So that's the first story. We're going to read one more. Let's see how long this one is. Oh, this one I think actually describes who all of the gods are. So we'll go through some of those. This is the Valaquenta, which is basically just describing who the various gods and demigods are. So here we go. The Valaquenta. Account of the Valar and Maiar, according to the lore of the Eldar. You need a frickin' this dictionary for these words. Eldar, again, fancy word for elf. The Maiar are gonna be like demigods. We'll learn more about them. The Valar are the gods who went into Earth to create the world. Okay. In the beginning, Eru, the One, who in the Elvish tongue is Ilúvatar, made the Ainur of his thought, and they made a great music before him. In this music the world was begun, for Ilúvatar made visible the song of the Ainur, and they beheld it as a light in the darkness. And many among them became enamored of its beauty, and of its history which they saw beginning and unfolding as in a vision. Therefore Ilúvatar gave to their vision being, and set it amid the void, and the secret fire was sent to burn at the heart of the world, and it was called Ea. Then those of the Ainur who desired it rose and entered into the world at the beginning of time, and it was their task to achieve it, and by their labors to fulfill the vision which they had seen. Long they labored in the regions of Ea, which were vast beyond the thought of elves and men, until in the time appointed was made Arda, the kingdom of earth. Then they put on the raiment of earth and descended into it, and dwelt therein. Of the Valar. Yes, Akatsuki's right. Gandalf is a Maiar. The wizards are all Maiar, which is basically demigod, angel, those kind of things. The great among these spirits the elves named the Valar, the powers of Arda, and men have often called them gods. The lords of the Valar are 7, and the Valier, the queens of the Valar, are 7 also. Because he's Catholic and everybody has to be married. Except I think there's like one that's not. These were their names in the Elvish tongue, as it was spoken in Valinor, though they have other names in the speeches of the elves in Middle-earth, and their names among men are manifold. The names of the lords in due order are Manwe, Ulmo, Eul, Arome, Mandos, Lorien, and Tulkas. And the names of the queens are Varda, Yavanna, Nenya, Este, Vere, Vanna, and Nessa. Melkor is counted no longer among the Valar, and his name is not spoken upon earth. Manwe and Melkor were brethren in the thought of Iluvatar. The mightiest of those Ainur who came into the world was in his beginning Melkor, but Manwe is dearest to Iluvatar and understands most clearly his purposes. He was appointed to be, in the fullness of time, the first of all kings, lord of the realm of Arda and ruler of all that dwell within. In Arda his delight is in the wind and clouds, and in all regions of the air. From the heights to the depths, from the utmost borders of the vale of Arda, to the breezes that blow in the grass. Sulimo he is surnamed, lord of breath of Arda. All swift birds, strong of wind he loves, and they come and go at his bidding. So the first god they're talking about is Manwe, M-A-N-W-E. He's basically king god. He's Michael. He's the enemy of Melkor. The Vale of Arda they talk about is like the barrier between the inner and outer, the physical world and the world where all the gods, in the outer gods, not the Valar. You understand? The Valar in this world, the gods are physical, but there are other gods who are chilling with the big god out in outer space, beyond the veil. With Manwe dwells Varda, Lady of the Stars, who knows all the regions of Ea. Too great is her beauty to be declared in the words of men or elves, for the light of Iluvatar lives still in her face. In light is her power and her joy. Out of the deeps of Ea she came to the aid of Manwe. From Melkor she knew from before the beginning of the music and rejected him, and he hated her, and feared her more than all others whom Eru made. Manwe and Varda are seldom parted, and they remain in Valinor. Their halls are above the everlasting snow. Okay, we're getting into a lot of... Okay, let me explain. Valinor is one continent on the planet. Middle-earth is the one that everybody knows. That's where all the people live. The ones, the elves, the men. Valinor is where the gods live. It's the place of everlasting peace. It's the magical land. That's Valinor. And there's lots of places in Valinor. He's about to name a bunch of them, and that's where all the gods have their different temples and places and kingdoms, and all that. Their halls are above the everlasting snow upon Iolose, the uttermost tower of Ten Quitil, tallest of all the mountains upon earth. When Manwe there descends his throne and looks forth, if Varda is beside him, he sees further than all other eyes, through mist and through darkness, over the leagues of the sea. And if Manwe is with her, Varda hears more clearly than all other ears the sound of voices that cry from east to west, from the hills and the valleys, and from the dark places that Melkor has made upon earth. Of all the great ones who dwell in this world, the elves hold Varda most in reverence and love. Elbereth they name her, and they call upon her name out of the shadows of Middle-earth, and uplift it in song at the rising of the stars. Varda is amazing. She's one of the most fantastic characters of the gods. She's the one that Melkor fears most. She's the one the elves love most. Like, she is amazing. She's a really great figure. Ulmo is the Lord of Waters. He is alone. He dwells nowhere long, but moves as he will in all the deep waters about the earth or under the earth. He is next in might to Manwë, and before Valinor was made he was closest to him in friendship. But thereafter he went seldom to the councils of the Valar, unless great matters were in debate. For he kept all Arda in thought, and he has no need of any resting place. Moreover, he does not love to walk upon land, and will seldom close himself in a body after the manner of his peers. If the children of Eru beheld him, they were filled with a great dread, for the arising of the king of the sea was terrible, as a mounting wave that strides to the land, with dark helm foam-crested, and raiment of mail shimmering from silver down into shadows of deep green. The trumpets of Manwë are loud, but Ulmo's voice is deep as the deeps of the ocean, which only he has seen. So Ulmo doesn't take a human form often. He is basically all water. In various stories, they kind of discuss that he can reach any body of water, any river, any ocean, and chills there. He doesn't take physical form, but he does interact with people sometimes. He doesn't really interact with the other gods a lot. He just chills in the water. He likes being alone, and he's not married. Nonetheless, Ulmo loves both elves and men, and never abandoned them, not even when they lay under the wrath of the Valar. At times he will come unseen to the shores of Middle-earth, or pass far inland upon firths of the sea, and there make music upon his great horns, the Ulumuri, that are wrought of white shell. And those to whom that music comes hear it ever after in their hearts, and longing for the sea never leaves them again. But mostly Ulmo speaks to those who dwell in Middle-earth with voices that are heard only as the music of water. For all seas, lakes, rivers, fountains, and springs are in his government. So that the elves say the spirit of Ulmo runs in all the veins of the world. Thus news comes to Ulmo even in the deeps of all the needs and griefs of Arda, which otherwise would be hidden from Manwë. Aiul has might little less than Ulmo. This is the earth god. His lordship is over all the substances of which Arda is made. In the beginning he wrought much in fellowship with Manwë and Ulmo, and the fashioning of all lands was his labor. He is a smith and a master of crafts, and he delights in works of skill, however small, as much as in the mighty buildings of old. His are the gems that lie deep in the earth, and the gold that is fair in the hand, no less than the walls of the mountains and the basins of the sea. The Noldor learned most of him, and he was ever their friend. Noldor, they're a type of people. They're a culture. I can't remember if they were humans or elves. I'm leaning towards elves. Melkor was jealous of him, for Aiul was most like himself in thought and in powers, and there was long strife between them, in which Melkor was ever marred or undid the works of Aiul, and Aiul grew weary in repairing the tumults and disorders of Melkor. So Aiul is a smith. He makes weapons, he makes gems, jewelry, that kind of thing. Melkor is also a smith. They both make things. And so Melkor is jealous. Is Silmarillion basically an index of Tolkien's lore? So the Silmarillion is his, he wrote these stories as ways of building the lore of his world. A lot of them were written during war times when he was in the trenches or in the hospital after the war, or shortly thereafter, if I remember correctly. Most of these, I think, were written very early in his writing career, and he did not publish them himself. I don't know that he ever intended anyone to read them. His son edited and published them. But they do kind of just walk through his mythological universe. Let's see here. Both desired to make things of their own that should be new and unthought of by others, and delighted in the praise of their skill. But Aiul remained faithful to Eru, and submitted all he did to his will, and he did not envy the work of others, but sought and gave counsel. Whereas Melkor gave his spirit in envy and hate, until at last he could make nothing save in mockery of the thought of others, and all their works he destroyed if he could. So, we'll go into it another day, but Aiul is the creator of the dwarves. He is their god. He is most special to them, and he's also a smith, so obviously they're gonna like him. Now we're gonna talk about his wife, who's amazing. The spouse of Aiul is Yavanna, the giver of fruits. She is the lover of all things that grow in the earth, and all their countless forms she holds in her mind, from the trees like towers in forests long ago, to the moss upon stones, or the small and secret things in the mold. In reverence, Yavanna is next to Varda among the queens of the Valar. In the form of a woman, she is tall and robed in green, but at times she takes other shapes. Some there are who have seen her standing like a tree under heaven, crowned with the sun, and from all its branches there spilled a golden dew upon the barren earth, and and of it grew green with corn. But with the roots of the trees were in the waters of Ulmo, and the winds of Manwe spoke in its leaves. Kementari, queen of the earth, she is surnamed in the Eldarin tongue. So Yavanna is Eul's wife. Yavanna is popular among fans and is tended to, kind of headcanon-wise, be seen as the creator of the Hobbits. I do not believe Tolkien ever specifically explained. I think he actually basically says nobody knows where hobbits came from. Unlike the dwarves, who he says Eul created the dwarves, Iluvatar created elves and men, Melkor creates orcs later. He never says who creates the hobbits. Fans tend to say it was Yavanna. The Fientari, masters of spirits, are brethren, and they are called most often Mandos and Lorien. These are rightly the names of their places of dwelling, and their... Oh, jeez, he has to do this. Their true names are Namo and Ermo. Okay, so let's walk through those 3 sentences. The Fientari, masters of spirits. So the Fientari is the term for the twin brothers. This is sometimes done in mythology where a set of twins or what have you have a special name, like Artemis and Apollo, I think, did, and I can't remember what it was. They are often called Mandos and Lorien, but those are actually the names of the places where they live. So that would be like if we called Lucifer Hell, because he lives in Hell. So these gods are often called after the places they live. Their real names are Namo and Ermo. Namo, the Elder, dwells in Mandos, which is westward in Valinor. He's the keeper of the houses of the dead and the summoner of the spirits of the slain. He forgets nothing, and he knows all things that shall be, save only those that lie still in the freedom of Iluvatar. He is the doomsman of the Valar, but he pronounces his dooms and his judgments only at the bidding of Manwe. Vere the Weaver is his spouse, who weaves all things that have ever been in time into her storied webs, and the halls of Mandos that ever widen as the ages pass are clothed with them. Excuse me. So the halls of Mandos are where dead spirits go. Oh, geez, my voice. There are multiple versions due to different editors or other reasons. Yeah, so Tolkien rewrote these stories a lot over the years, and then his son himself, Christopher Tolkien, who was his editor and controlled his works for a long time, over the years kind of rewrote and reworked the stories. Like, there are stories in this book that we will talk about, like Beren and Luthien in this book is like a 15-page short story that, where did I put it? Here we go. Christopher Tolkien later published as a full book, so he, worked from his father's notes to create a fuller version of the story. So that's why there are multiple versions of all these. Ermo the Younger is the master of visions and dreams. In Lorien are his gardens in the land of the Valar, and they are the fairest of all places in the world, filled with many spirits. Este the Gentle, healer of hurts and weariness, is his spouse. Grey is her raiment, and rest is her gift. She walks not by day, but sleeps upon an island in the tree-shadowed lake of Lorelin. From the fountains of Ermo and Este, all those who dwell in Valinor draw refreshment, and often the Valar come themselves to Lorien, and there find repose and easing of the burdens of Arda. Alright. Mightier than Este is Nenya, sister of the Fientari. So the Fientari, those two dudes, the god of dreams and the god of death, have a sister. Sister is Nenya. She dwells alone, no husband. She is acquainted with grief and mourns for every wound Arda has suffered in the marring of Melkor. So great was her sorrow as the music unfolded that her song turned to lamentation long before its end, and the sound of mourning was woven into the themes of the world before it began. But she does not weep for herself, and those who hearken to her learn pity and endurance in hope. Her halls are west of west, upon the borders of the world, and she comes seldom to the city of Valimar, where all is glad. She goes to the halls of Mandos, which are near her own, and all those who wait in Mandos cry to her, for she brings strength to the spirit and turns sorrow to wisdom. The windows of her house look outward from the walls of the world. Nenya's a really fascinating and very important figure. She is basically the image of grief and strength in grief. She mourns for people. She teaches them how to survive their sorrow, and is later named as the mentor of a very important figure, Gandalf. Gandalf learned everything he knows at the seat of his teacher, who was Nenya, and Nenya is the teacher of pity and compassion and loss. And I think it's very interesting that one of his most important fictional characters is shown to be the student of a figure like that. That those are the kind of things that Tolkien really admired, was that ability, because he survived a war, and then he sent his own son to war, so he dealt a lot with that kind of depression and loss. He had a lot of issues in his personal life, and I think it's very fascinating that he values that so highly. Greatest in strength and deeds of prowess is Tulkas, who is surnamed Astaldo the Valiant. He came last to Arda to aid the Valar in the first battles with Melkor. He delights in wrestling and in contests of strength, and he rides no steed, for he can outrun all things that go on feet. And he is tireless. His hair and beard are golden, and his flesh ruddy. His weapons are his hands. He has little heed for either the past or future, and is of no avail as a counselor, but is a hardy friend. His spouse is Nessa, the sister of Arome, and she is also lithe and fleet-footed. Deer she loves, and they follow her train whenever she goes in the wild, but she can outrun them, swift as an arrow with the wind in her hair. In dancing she delights, and she dances in Valimar on lawns of never-fading green. Arome is a mighty lord. If he is less strong than Tulkas, he is more dreadful in anger. Where Tulkas laughs ever in sport or war, and even in the face of Melkor he laughed in battles before the elves were born. Arome loved the lands of Middle-earth, and he left them unwillingly and came last to Valinor. And often of old he passed back east over the mountains and returned with his host to the hills and the plains. He is a hunter of monsters and fell beasts, and he delights in horses and in hounds. All trees he loves, for which reason he is called Alderon, and by the Sindar, Tauron, Lord of Forests. Sindar are another type of elf. Remember, he likes to have various different cultures of elves who all have their own languages and words. Nahar is the name of his horse, white in the sun and shining silver at night. The Valaroma is the name of his horn, the sound of which is like the upgoing of the sun in scarlet, or the sheer lightning cleaving the clouds. That's hard to say. Above all the horns of his host, it was heard in the woods that Yavanna brought forth in Valinor. For there Arome would train his folk and his beasts for the pursuit of the evil creatures of Melkor. The spouse of Arome is Vanna, the ever-young. She is the younger sister of Yavanna. All flowers spring as she passes, and open if she glances upon them, and all birds sing at her coming. So that's the last story we'll read for now. Valaquenta continues, but that is the end of describing all the Valar. We'll go through, let's walk through who they are real quick again. Because there's 7 men, 7 women. 6 of them are married, and then each, the men and the women, have one eternal spouse. Is the elf-on-elf racism actual canon or just fanon? I think there's some issues there. It's been a while since I've read the older stuff, but yeah, there's some genocides and some wars and some, yeah, there was a whole banishment of a clan because they killed another clan. We'll get there. So, Manwe is the king god, awesome guy. He loves the air. He kicks Melkor's ass. His wife is Varda, Lady of the Stars. Everybody loves Varda. Melkor's terrified of Varda. She's a badass. Ulmo is the water god who chills in the water and doesn't really go meet everybody else. He's not married. He just likes being in the ocean with the sea and the critters. Let's see here. Aul is the earth god. He's the smith, the rival of Melkor, because they both are smithies, and he creates the dwarfs. Yavanna is the goddess of earth and kind of the Demeter type, plants and all that. People tend to associate her with the hobbits, and she is Aul's wife. And then you got Namo, the death god, lives in Mandos. Irmo, his brother, lives in Lorien, and he's the dream god. They both have wives who are barely footnotes in the story. They very, very rarely come up. Nenya is their sister. She is a single lady, all the single ladies. And she is associated with grief and mourning and the strength to get through those things. She is Gandalf's teacher. Tulkas is the wrestle god. He likes to fight. Arome is the hunter god. And Arome is also married to Vanna. Both of their wives are also very small. The most important female figures that you're really actually going to see in the stories and see them mentioned in larger roles are going to be Nenya, Varda, and Yavanna. Those are the 3 female goddesses that actually do things. The other goddesses are kind of... You'll see them in the background and stuff, but they aren't as big figures in the stories. Male gods, Aul is going to be very important, Manwe is going to be very important, Ulmo is going to be the ocean dude. So really, there's a whole pantheon, but the ones that are going to be the most heavily involved in Tolkien stories, the ones that interact with humans and with elves, are going to be those 3. Manwe, Ulmo, Aul, Yavanna, Varda, Nenya. Those are the ones you really want to remember. But the other ones do kind of pop up every once in a while, but not much. So yeah, that's where we'll quit today. I had a great time reading all this again. Man, it's bringing back memories. Put that right there. Page 29. I think we'll do this like twice a week, because if we did it once a week, we'd never make it through these freaking stories. I'm thinking maybe next week it'll be Monday, Wednesday. This week I don't know if we'll make 2, because I started on a Tuesday, and I may try and read tomorrow, but we'll see. Thank you for joining me. I hope folks enjoyed it. Any chance of symbolism on Loader? Possibly. Honestly, if I were to do that, it would probably end up being the video games that came out in recent years, because I really love them, and they do some interesting things with Tolkien's worlds. But we'll play those eventually. That'll be fun. So thank you for joining me. I will be back at 3 today for Shin Megami Tensei. We may try and play longer if I can and see how far we can get towards the ending. Thanks again for joining me. The usual stuff. All the links are in the description if you want to support the channel, join the Discord, hang out, that kind of thing. So I will see you guys in a few hours. Bye.